So we've just had the first week of RLCS completed. North America, MENA and APAC have all completed their RLCS Week 1 regional. So that's the open, the full open. We're going to be going through the games from North America, from each of those regions. And we'll also look at the European qualifier and look forward to next weekend to see what happens there. I'm live right now on Twitch. If you want to check out my analysis live, I'm going to be doing some games today. I'm going to be doing all the finals and the semi-finals from North America live on stream. So you'll be able to check that out. You can also get involved in the videos on the chat here. So we'll start off with North America. So in terms of results, we won't go into too much detail, but the ending of the tournament was here. You can see GenG, Appjack in particular, Applejack as he's now called by the casters, thanks to the Faze team stream with Scissors calling him Applejack. So yeah, he's played amazingly. Chronic looking really good. Nolly playing his role superbly well, and GenG looked great until that final where Faze came out on top and just looked like the best team we've ever seen out of North America. They dominated G2 here. First Killer is looking amazing. One of the best players in the world right now. And he's looking very comfortable and he's smiling as well, which is huge on the cameras. Right, so the North American RLCS full open. So the open is now Regional 1. The overlay is still on. Right, reload the ting. We're going to start again. We won't bring up Norton in the YouTube video. That's a Twitch exclusive. Knowing my editor, he's going to chuck this in because he's a little cheeky bugger, is Sunny. So we will go into this final analysis here. It was a 5-game best-of-7 series, Faze dominating. If we have a little look at the stats, let's go through here. What you'll notice is, actually in this series not so much, it was more in the G2 series, but First Killer played amazingly, scoring a lot of goals. Actually no assists in this one, but yeah, he was scoring a lot of goals. I think in the tournament as a whole, he had a 1.09 goal per game rate, which is so good. Like anything above 1 is amazing in North America or Europe. Pretty even with the shooting, like both teams shooting about 9 and then GenG about 8 here. But it's the goals, right? 2.2 goals per game for Faze and then 0.6 goals for GenG. If we have a quick little look at the boost here, let's see if there's anything of note. Nothing jumping out straight away. I think everyone is munching a lot of boost, but in like a fast-paced gameplay kind of way. Jack quite low. There is some numbers here, like you can see Mist behind the ball a lot more, and apparently Jack in front of the ball a lot more. You know, not literally, like I'm looking at this and there is no big standout. So a very high quality final, it seems. It will be the biggest difference maker when you look at stats like that and everyone's fairly balanced, is going to be the execution in game. You know, those small little statistically irrelevant differences like quality of touches, outplay ability. Are you taking multiple players out of the game with a single series of touches? Are you shooting well or shooting where a keeper can save it and so on? And looking at the shooting percentage, that was probably the biggest statistical difference, where it was around just below 10% per player for GenG, where it was around 20 to 35% for the Faze players. So that means they're either breaking down GenG more, which is leading them to have more goals, or their quality of outplay is that bit better, that they are scoring their opportunities much more often. So we see here, First Killer looking like one of the best players in the world this weekend, especially in the G2 series. The first thing you always look at in more efficient players is their positioning and their read of the play. Like First Killer's read of the play is so good. He's in the right place very often. You can see right here. But it's the amount of boost used per action on the ball, right? So we've just seen a series of touches from First Killer, right? First touch, used like 15 boosts for that touch. He's now landed with barely anything. Positioning-wise, was able to make that touch with very little boost. 12 boost. That's forced a double save out of the keepers just using 12 boosts. Comes up, 81 boosts as he makes that touch. As he's going down, use a little bit of boost for recovery. Does take the far boost, but is part of his journey to the ball. Again, 69 boosts left over. So he's sat there with nearly 100 again without having to rotate out. Which is where then... Excuse me for a second. I think I'm going to sneeze. So you can see by the positioning of first kill. It's lingering. It's there. I can feel it. It's coming. Yeah, the positioning from first killer is partly due to his boost efficiency. Because when you're not having to rotate out as much, you're not having to rotate back in and find your slot in the rotation. So you can see he's able to read the play whilst hovering around on these lower boost amounts. And not need to focus on clearing out. Like you can see right here, like able to stick in the play on low boost. So you see how patient his rotation off the ball is because he doesn't need to clear out, right? Didn't commit there, so therefore he was able to commit on that one, use 40 boost. Because he got that last boost before, he knew where it was. You can just see how efficient everything is. And it just, like the change of decision from him at the last moment is really hard to read for the defenders. And even on these really simple touches, so this ceiling touch here, right? Change of speed here, suddenly accelerates, slows down, touches it off the wall. Jack does get to it, hits it to nollie, but you can see because of the way he's positioned himself, and this is where him and Mist work really well together, like this whole time, Mist can read off of this, right? Like Mist is able to track this beautifully and never feel under pressure from this whole play. So you see here, it just forces nollie high. I think Sipical probably should have been on the back wall there. But he saw, you see like, this is where the mistake comes in. And it's unfortunate, it happens. Sipical should have gone back wall, but because of Mist's positioning as he looked back at Mist, he thought Mist was going to go the back wall, so he went grounded. Whereas actually here, Sipical should have just got up the back wall, thinking Mist was on there. On the ground, right? And then he would have been able to just track that and clear that away. So this should have been a goal for GenG just off of this typical decision to not go back wall. But you can see even here, right? Like how fast Faze are. There's going to be pressure on GenG to push on the ball faster, which is why Jack is so far forward. But equally, that could have been a GenG goal for sure. So yeah, it's a little bit of the mis-execution. So when we look back at the stats and we sort of compare the stats of the two teams, one of the things we noticed was GenG had a low shooting percentage, and we were wondering whether that was down to the structure of Faze or whether that was down to GenG not doing as good at execution. I think watching that little passage of play there, that's early signs that it could be due to a lack of execution from GenG towards the goal, not quite turning pressure into goals where they should be. Let's have a little watch of Mist now. So we've had a good look at First Killer and can appreciate what's so beautiful about his gameplay. Let's have a little look here at Mist. So the big thing we saw about Mist earlier is the tracking and reading of the play and just allowing Sipical and First to comfortably go for the ball, knowing that he's going to be there to clean it up, which you can see right here. And I think it was in one of the qualifiers, First Killer had like a 15% shooting percentage where it was a bit like, oh, that's not so good. But then he had crazy amount of assists and Mist had like 57% on his shooting percentage. I can't remember what that was from. But yeah, that was a recent series we analysed. We saw those stats. And that's a sign that Mist is coming in as that traditional third player. You know, we look back to Fireburner back in the day on NRG. He had quite a high goal participation in terms of scoring, because he would come in as the third and clean up after the chaos that had been created. And that's typically what the third will do. A good third will come in and clean up after their teammates have broken opposition down. Let's watch the big man. Oh, look, this is the mindset of someone who knows they're playing with First Killer. Look at this. He's gone, hey, First Killer, mate, have the ball. I'll clean up. Sipical's coming in. It's like, bosh. That's so good. Magnificent play, if you do say so yourself. Look at that. Jeez. That's so good. Like, this is what we talk about with star player potential, right? When we looked back at the stats for First Killer and he got a lot of assists but not a huge amount of goals and had quite a low shooting percentage, that shouldn't be a concern for people if they look at the stats of players like Mist who then have a high shooting percentage, because this is what happens off the back of players like that. Like First Killer right here, takes out Jack, 50-50 is Chronic. Nolly's now in a rough position because he had to cover for Chronic in case something went wrong. Then this sets up the goal-scoring position, right? So first killer 1v3 is creating that advantage position, and then having solid players like Mist and Sypical around that who can just finish it off is the reason why Faze have got a really solid structure now, and why first killer has been unlocked. I mean, he's always been amazing, but like he seems fully unlocked in this team now, and the way they rotate around each other is a lot more traditional good Rocket League than what we saw from Faze before. Like, I started to accept that the way Faze played before was a way that Rocket League could be played. I wasn't a fan of it, but it was a way you could play. The idea of, we're going to score 4 bangers a game and that should win us a game, but we might concede 2 or 3 goals because we're not structured very well. I didn't like it, but I got it. I understood it. Whereas I feel like this team has much more potential to do stuff like perfect sweeps, win by 3-4 goals, and so on. And like this game is a great example of that, right? They're winning 4-0 here. So if we see why, the patience here from Mist, like, this isn't fair to say what AJ would do in this situation, but like you can see in this situation, I feel like the patience wasn't there from old Faze. Like right here, I imagine what would have happened is someone would have gone for this and tried doing something with it, whereas Mist is just patiently waiting for the opportunity to come in. First killer, and because of that, can see first killer's there. That means first killer can do a low boost play, which brings more value into Mist. Mist can see where Sypical is, and they're much more structured around each other. And then that opens up the space for Sypical to go and have a go at an outplay, right? So it's that control the structure as a team that's allowing Faze to bring the best out of the mechanics of Sypical and first killer. You can see right here, Sypical can confidently go for this ball, trusting the structure that's behind, where, you know, what we saw a lot of Faze of old was they wouldn't go for the ball and they would sit back and try and perfect read people's outplays, which doesn't work consistently. Whereas the fact that you can see right here, Sypical is gone, not used up a huge amount of boost. Mist is gone as the lowest boost player. This is beautiful defensive decision making. When you're in defense, the player with the least boost is often the best person to go for the ball, because firstly, the opponents don't know they've got no boost, right? Right now, Nolly doesn't know how much boost Mist has got. He might know he's low, but the difference between 0 and 28, 30 boost is quite a lot. So it's hard to know exactly how much boost Mist has got and what he's truly capable of. And the other advantage you got is if the person with 0 boost commits, they're much more likely to land away from the defense, which is where the boost pads are, right? You know, we talk about sort of this boost here and this boost here being so key in defense, because normally what happens in a good offensive rotation is the players are able to rotate out and boost starve the boost here and the boost here and keep a team under locks. And what often happens is the fight for a mid boost is what decides whether a team breaks out of defense or not. Because if you can force a player, land, get the mid boost and come back in, then you can often bring your team out of defensive positioning. And so that's why having the low boost player go, because what you see right here is Nolly is taken off the ball, Appjack is forced and rushed to play fast by Sypical, but Mist is out the rotation now, but it doesn't matter because Faze have now got possession, because the player with boost gets the ball. What ends up happening, Mist lands near boost. I know this wasn't exactly how I described it going, like he could have maybe been close to the mid boost if he didn't get bumped. Yeah, generally you want your lowest boost player to be going for that initial, like the initiator role, the first person challenging role. So what I like about this, like even though this from Mist isn't the strongest mechanics, right? Like Mist has not quite done what he's hoped to do with his mechanics here. The fact that he's taken his time right here makes it safe. This is one of the big things I like about well-structured teams, like your BDSs. Like G2, when they were playing really well last season, one of the things they did beautifully is the timing of when they went for stuff and when they went for big outplays was allowing people to rotate back. So you can see here, Mist has seen that Sipical is not going to have the fastest rotation, right? Like Sipical's on low boost, he's landing statically. So the key here from Mist is to take up enough time to allow Sipical to rotate back, and then that way First Killer can help out Mist, right? Because if right now Mist rushes this, it's not going to allow First Killer to go without it being risky. And so then right here what you see is First Killer could in theory have gone for this ball because Sipical has rotated back already, right? What ends up happening, Mist mechanically, like I said, didn't do quite what he wanted to do. So you see right here, wanted to go for the 50-50, didn't quite get it. First mistake of the team. First Killer gets bumped here, I think. Yeah, Nolly. Nolly got him there. So then that means that's taken 2 players out of the game. And because Mist didn't quite execute as well as he was hoping to on that play, it meant that the 50-50 didn't come out, and that means Jack gets free ball coming out of this. And this is really good from Jack, actually. Like, if we watch from Jack's point of view, the fact that he gets clean on this ball is pretty good. Right, like, the fact that he got past Mist there, that's really good from Jack, right? The errors here from Faze are not decision-based errors, which would have been the case in the past of Faze. These are execution errors. I think it's fair to say Mist using 100 boost to end up starting Jack up on the counter-attack. That's an unfortunate error from Mist. First, getting static in the midfield and being a bump target is an unfortunate, like, tiny error, but it is an error nonetheless, right? Because that sets up the counter-attack. And then Sipical, not really a huge amount he can do, but, like, I'm sure we could go back and find boost decisions that led him to be in that position. I'm not going to go back too deep on it, but yeah. Like, him being on low boost there and having to go back for the 100 was an unfortunate error. This is, when we spoke about the stats and the shooting percentage of GenG, this is another example of it. Should have been a goal, right? This was a goal opportunity for GenG. Let's have a little look at Sipical in general. Fair play, getting back to that. Big respect from Mist here. Look at this. Yeah, my teammate can get back for that. Almost another goal there. Could Nolly have scored that? Let's have a little look. I mean, there's obviously a world where he takes it slower. I mean, that's a pretty powerful shot. I don't think there's a huge amount more. Like, there is a world, but like I would say that there is a world where he scores that, but like that's not the easiest of shots to do, right? A rolling ball. A rolling ball that's been suddenly changed direction and a player charging you down, like it's not an easy save to make, but the recovery from Sip was so good. But let's just look, I did this in rank the other day. It's not that special, but it's still pretty cool to see it being utilized this well. That's such good game awareness. Yeah, you can see Mist is very patient. Again, the time taken up by Mist being patient is lovely because it allows First Killer to get back, and then it means when Mist does go for this, Mist can go with full confidence. But also look at the tension it builds, right? This is something that people don't realize. When you play at the highest level of Rocket League, the change up of rhythm can really throw off teams. And I don't know how much Mist knows about this, whether this is just because Mist plays at a much more methodical, slower rate. But it's also the fact that, you know, Mist is playing slower where First Killer's playing faster. It's really hard to manage who's going for the ball. So sometimes you're just going to wait and think, oh, Mist is going, so therefore I've got more time. And then sometimes you'll rush because you think First Killer's going. And you see what's happened here is Jack turns on this ball blindly, right? First Killer's pressured him there, turns on this ball blindly, doesn't know where Mist is, and so he plays as if there's a player closer, and then when he realizes Mist isn't close, he then backflips, right? Whereas if that was First Killer in defense, First Killer might have charged it down instantly. So that change up of pace within the team can often force errors. It's something we speak about when we spoke about BDS at full major. You know, I mentioned the fourth defender, which is the effect Mark by 8 had on teams, which was that Mark by 8 was so constantly in your face that when Mark by 8 wasn't in your face, you imagined him in your face. That's part of the effect of first killer being so aggressive and then Mist being so patient. But again, that's so good from Mist, just the patience there. I like this. This is interesting. The slow cheat from first killer. Sypical going for the back corner kickoff very aggressively. So you watch here the way Sypical's going for this kickoff, very aggressively deflecting it to the back corner, which means that if your opponents do the same thing, it's much more likely to roll back towards your own half. And if you do send it towards the back corner, it's going to roll towards the back corner. And then first killer is able to react off of that. So I really like this kickoff here. I like Mist's boost grab. Turns tightly on the boost, so you can see as the ball is 50-50 in the middle, he's already turning into the middle of the pitch. So this is a really nice kickoff. And then obviously, like we said, first killer with the slow cheat works in his favor because you see how Nolly panicked thinking there was someone closer than they were. So he went to pre-jump the chip and then there was nobody there. So then first killer could just play the 50-50. So this is a really good kickoff strategy here from Faze. Appjack should have been pushing up on the left side a bit more there, maybe. Yeah, just a bit of misexecution from GenG. That'll come with time and experience, I think. That was the main thing I noticed in their gameplay when they weren't playing so well in the earlier qualifiers, is they seem to lack a little bit of execution in the big moments. It was trying to force passes in the neutral, and then in the big moments, they just didn't quite see each other's vision. You know, like right here, for example. Similar kind of thing, right? Like Chronic. I mean, they are 3-0 down trying to force a goal. Chronic right here just needs to get used to the fact that in this situation, Jack is going to play to himself, right? And that just comes with time. Like, that's an unreal play by Jack. He's beaten one and bumped the last. That's a goal-scoring opportunity for Chronic. But it just takes a bit of getting used to what your teammates are capable of, what kind of decisions they go for. The classic example I give is if you're in a 2v1 and you've got the ball and Arsenal is your teammate, you're going to take a dribble trusting that Arsenal's going to go for the demo. If you're in a 2v1 and your teammate is, I don't know, let's just say first killer for Mist is going to try and offload to first killer in a favourable way that first killer can punish them, right? Or he's going to look to take the last player at the game to set up first killer. You know, like that's the difference in everyone's on the ball plays and how they play with each other off the ball is something that just comes with time. Right, I think we've pretty much got the gist of this series now. I will start firing through the games a bit and start focusing mostly on goals. But let's have a little look at GenG. We've looked at Faze and we can appreciate what makes them so strong right now. I don't think they're unbeatable, that's for sure. I think there are gaps in the mistake. You'll have to have really strong structure against them and make sure you execute in as many situations as possible, which is essentially that's just good Rocket League, right? Like we said, this was looking at the stats, this looked like good Rocket League, right? But the difference was stuff like this, right? Like it's just execution is the difference, right? Like GenG have broken down Faze, have got a shot opportunity to the top right corner. Nolly just misses, right? And that's where the stats came in, that the shooting percentage was lower on average for GenG. I was wondering whether it was thanks to Faze's defense, but I don't think Faze earned this lower shooting percentage from GenG. I think that's on GenG, if that makes sense. Like Faze haven't cut off every single shot from them, right? They haven't forced them wide or high. Like the saves weren't high enough really for that. They've just played against a team that's not quite finishing their chances. I still think Faze would have won based off of what I've seen so far if GenG finished all of their chances, but it certainly would have been closer, would have gone to some overtimes. You know, there's something to be said for the pressure that goals create and the easing effect that a miss has on you. You know, like we saw the cameras of Faze and they were enjoying themselves because of the fact that GenG weren't a threat to them. Whereas the moment the series gets close, that's when you start to feel tense. That's when you start to question yourself. You start to blame yourself for goals going in and so on and so on. And all the while GenG are missing those opportunities, FaZe are going to feel very comfortable and trust themselves and trust that what they're doing is the right thing, you know? Like, these getting saved, they're going to be like, oh, ain't nothing going to get through us today, you know? Good patience here from Chronic. I think that's somewhat of an adaptation from them to recognise that the last on FaZe is sitting quite deep a lot of the time. This is something a lot of people don't think about when they take their time. You know, like, if you take your time and your opponent's last defender doesn't go, you then gain territory on your opponents and you get closer to the net, creating an opportunity to potentially score, right? Which is what Chronic does here. On this occasion, Sypical backs off because technically Chronic was closer, so at any moment Chronic could beat Sypical to the ball, so Sypical can't go. Sypical stays deep in this case and doesn't take the risk of going despite being in the blind spot. Sets up an opportunity for Chronic, doesn't quite work out. Appjack for some reason goes, we won't talk about that. The other scenario is where Sypical goes, right? Now, who in GenG's team can see if Sypical's going? Also, there's comms as well. For Jack and Nolly, they can tell him he's got time, right? That's another way for Chronic to work through this. But say Sypical suddenly decides to dart for this ball, Nolly, in theory, would have been the coverage for it, or Jack, in theory, would have been the coverage for it, and it would have just gone back to the neutral game, right? So that situation is one that I think a lot of people don't remember, is that as the goal scoring potential, if you rush, you might have no chance of scoring. If you're patient, you might have a chance of scoring. And if your opponent rushes, all that happens, it goes back to neutral. So I think a lot of the time people need to be a bit more patient in the final execution. And it's something you see a lot in teams that are rushing, is that they rush the shot, they rush the final outplay despite the opponent being patient and waiting. And that's certainly something that happened a lot in KRN versus Falcons, which we watched. As Falcons were rushing their final shot, KRN were just milking it and waiting. Whereas if you take that extra half a second to a second to delay your shot, get a bit closer, save your dodge to catch your opponent off guard at a closer range where they have to start guessing rather than having the ability to read your touch, that's when you start scoring in those opportunities, right? Really good from Mist to see the Breezy coming out and closing it down. This game, I mean, obviously this is the game that GenG win. They are looking pretty solid here. Like I said, like GenG had a reasonably good game plan. It was the execution that was letting them down a little bit of lack of synergy and understanding of each other. Maybe a little bit of an adrenaline dump from getting to the final. You know, that's something that happens to a lot of teams when they make their first finals. You know, they're not quite prepared for that adrenaline dump of making it to the finals. What a shot from Nolly. Really nice breakdown here. Appjack, patient with the play, as we mentioned. Being patient a lot of the time is the best option because no one's actually going to challenge you most of the time. You outplay yourself, and then yeah, the way that sat for Nolly, the fact he hit that on the full and hit it that cleanly and top corner, that's amazing. I'm just going to jump ahead to the final game. We'll skip through game 4 because we're getting the general gist of the series here. Oh, that's a clanger there from Jack. Really good touch from Nolly. So right here, Mist, first touch, challenged by Chronic beautifully. Takes that ball off the opponent. Nice little 50-50 with a quick recovery. Obviously, it wasn't really a 50-50. It was just like taking it off of Mist. Often you want the 50-50 to go into a safe space, which is behind you or to the side of you. And right here, you see what happens. This ball comes off of Chronic, goes behind him. Nolly is able to react to it, right? It doesn't go at Nolly. It goes at the space behind Chronic, which Nolly is watching and ready to move into. So it is technically to a teammate, but when we move the ball around the pitch in Rocket League, we don't aim at a teammate. We aim at the space near a teammate, which your teammate's going to beat your opponents to. And that slight dispossession of the ball from Chronic meant Mist lost control. Sypical, I think, in the situation, thought Mist still had control, right? If we watch from his point of view. Right, like here. Until Nolly comes into frame, Sypical thinks Mist still has control. So it's a really good 50-50. And then, because now 2 players are behind the ball, Nolly can put Jack into a strong position. And that shot is actually unreal. Like, watch from first killer's point of view how powerful this shot is. That's so quick in top corner. Oh yeah, I remember this. Anybody want to go? Anybody want to go? Yeah, this was just GenG. No one... I don't think anyone really had the resources to take control of this ball. So you see, first killer, nice little grounded play, forces a jump out of the opposition. Chronic loses control of this ball on the follow through. Superb from Sip. I don't know how much of that was intentional. Yeah, very intentional. You can see putting the ball backwards towards Mist. They're getting broken down here by the ball just moving around them. And them chasing the game a little bit. I don't know where Jack went this whole time. Where's Jack off to? Yeah, again, this is what we said before about your highest boost player wants to be the one not going for the ball. Unfortunately, in this situation, both Chronic and Nolly jump, so he has to kind of go for the ball. But I'd like to see a bit more patience there and just waiting for Mist. Because, like, Mist is going to go here no matter what, right? Isn't taking this fast because of Jack. He's not going to take it slow for the sake of taking it slow. That's poor decision from Jack. Like, Jack needs to be the team savior. Because right here, GenG are in disadvantage. They're on the back foot. So you need to find a way to get out of disadvantage. And the way to do that is very rarely a player with boost throwing themselves at the player, you know? And I think something that's a great sign for Faze that I recommend you all do every now and again when watching their gameplay is just look at the boost meter up in the far left corner, right? Very frequently, they're hitting numbers that aren't 100 and 0. Old Faze were very much 100 or 0 a lot of the time, which is where if they've got 100 boost, they go for the ball. If they don't have 100 boost, they rotate out and get 100 boost. And that's a good sign of a team. It's something BDS do beautifully well, is they use as much boost as is needed to take opponents out of the play. And so they hover around different boost amounts a lot more. And then they'll make decisions based off of their boost amounts. So you can see how it, like, they'll pick up pads to top themselves up. They'll use a little bit of boost to go for the ball, pick up pads, use a little bit more ball. So it means that per tank of 100 boost you have more longevity in your time in the play because you're not going 100 down to 0, rotate out. 100 down to 0, rotate out. You're going 100 down to 50, up to 70, up down to 30, up to 50, up down. You see what I'm going with that? And that's where the, like, presence in the play lasts a lot longer from players doing that, and you keep teams under much more aggression, and it's much more oppressive in the way you hold them to the ball and make them panic a bit more. So in summary, it seems like FaZe have an amazing structure and are going to be very hard to beat because they have a consistent winning approach to the game now, where GenG is similar, but their execution was just a little bit off, it seemed, in this final. You know, a lack of experience from the guys, maybe a bit of an adrenaline dump from making it to the final. But GenG's game plan looks solid, but they were just missing in the final moments, and because of that, FaZe felt so comfortable that they were going to win that they never felt under pressure. And maybe if GenG were scoring some of those opportunities that we saw they missed, may have been a different series. But overall, GenG look like a really scary team to play against, as long as they can keep executing like they did in the semis and the quarters. There we go.